Hi guys, Mandie Sands here, 6th grade intervention specialist at Miamisburg Middle School. I posted a video, kind of a brief video on flexible thinking, and that one is kind of a precursor to this one. If you didn't watch that, it's absolutely fine, but I want to let you know that in order to reach depth and complexity, I would recommend checking out some ways to get your students in a space where they're willing to take more risks. So with that said, depth and complexity is a tough thing to get to when students are used to just following the rules, turning things in, and going through the motions. And these tools I'm going to share with you guys today are about making your lessons more fun, getting through the rigor of the content more quickly, getting higher student engagement, and making sure that you can throw something online without a lot of narrative, and it helps you connect with your students faster. So that's the goal. Let's talk about what this is. These are visual teaching tools. If you guys take a look at this system of icons here, these are all meant to be broken apart. There are 11 of them. They can be used individually or in conjunction with one another. The actual tools themselves are available as digital icons. I'll have a download linked below for you guys on that. I have a set of them in magnet form. I have a set of them that are on kind of a loop keyring form. And I have a large set for younger students that you might use as classroom posters or just put on the ledge on your whiteboard or hold up during a time when you're casting a lesson. So the resources are here. You're welcome to borrow them. Just reach out to me, even though I go by Mandie. My email is asands, A for Amanda, S-A-N-D-S, asands@Miamisburg. So that's about the resources. Once kids can think flexibly, anxiety goes down, kids are willing to make mistakes, that's when you can really start to focus on depth and complexity. I've talked to a couple of my friends at the high school who are teaching AP classes, and they say students really struggle with this, learning how to kind of connect seemingly unrelated notions or to see trends and changes over time, to understand how to take knowledge that they learned in one subject area and knowledge that they learned in another and kind of generalize back and forth between the two. This will help your students know how to do that. It works all the way down to kindergarten and all the way up to beyond college age. Here's an example of younger students, what they might do with this. So the icons that this teacher chose were these three. They're universal icons, all developed by Dr. Sandra Kaplan. This was a study on leafcutter ants. And you can see she said he said what are the big ideas about this lesson, and students were able to work in groups and come up with ideas that are kind of big picture. Unanswered questions. Yes, I know you guys are probably thinking, well, this is a KWL chart. Yeah, it is kind of what do we know, what do we want to know, but there are 11 icons in this, so it's taking kind of the premise of KWL and moving it way out. For instance, this one's one of my favorites, multiple perspectives. So what you do is you're taking what the students know about leafcutter ants, for instance, and you say, see them through the eyes of an entomologist. In this example, this teacher has asked them to look at it through those eyes and as a rainforest tourist. What might a tourist think? It forces kids to see the same content in new and different ways. Why do this? It adds meaning to the lesson when you can't be there. It also aids teaching because when you narrow in the scope of what you're doing and you ask them to look at something a certain way, it guides where student thinking goes and it adds a lot of excitement. Let's take a look at another tool. A lot of teachers out there use what's called frames, and so this icon is the ethics icon, and on the back of my card it just has a little teacher guide. What are some beliefs, values, or judgments that exist? How has bias, prejudice, or discrimination affected this topic? So after what was probably an informational nonfiction passage read in an ELA class, or maybe it was a science class, this teacher asked the students, what are some ethical issues involved with flying drones? I would imagine that would, evoke a lot of interesting dialogue about airspace, who governs that airspace, and how does that work legally. The process, we talked about the purpose. How does this work? You want to introduce the icons and practice with them until the class knows them on site. They understand what they are. On Google Classroom, you'd want to put up a legend so students can go back and refer to what each one means. You can literally put on Google Classroom your topic, something they're already somewhat familiar with, 2 to 4 icons. Let's take a look at language of the discipline, for instance, and multiple perspectives. And you can ask for student response. What are some keywords used in this topic? And what are some different ways you might see this, say through the eyes of, I don't know, it depends on the topic, but I think you get my point. You can launch chat forums, give each group in the chat forum a different icon, and they all approach it a different way. I think that's called a jigsaw. So each group becomes kind of, they get that content mastery from one perspective, and then they share out. Or you can make a frame with the 4 icons. Here's another example of a frame, and yes, this works for math. As a math teacher, I'm always thinking through that lens. There are a lot of tools out there that don't work as well for math, but this one is a great one. I'll just let you take a look at that graphic organizer. Here's another math example. So you introduce triangles. This works kind of at the beginning, at the introduction of something, but it also works once a student feels they've mastered the content. Any student would have to have a lot of knowledge on triangles to be able to fill this out well. But if you look more closely, this is language of the discipline. So what keywords? This icon is the details icon. What details do we know about different triangles? Over here, how are triangles addressed across disciplines? This is kind of a neat one. How does this come into play? Making sure I have it right side up. How does this come into play in science, ELA, the special areas? When might we use what we know about triangles in those areas? So now we've talked about the purpose. We've talked about the process. What's the payoff? What's in it for me? What's in it for my students? This is another thing to learn, another thing to get familiarized with. But lessons are differentiated in seconds here. So, for instance, if I were doing a lesson on the Civil War, I might ask my lower students to just list details, dates, times. That's the bottom of Maslow's, or I'm sorry, not Maslow's, Bloom's, rather. It's just knowledge. Where here, you might have your older students or your higher students take a look at changes over time. What have been the effects of the Civil War? What events led up to it? What happened during it? And what's happened since? How does what occurred in the Civil War affect who we are as a society today? It limits teacher talking. You don't have to chat a lot. Once they understand what rules means, the basic rules of algebra, the basic rules of spelling, you can put a word up on a Google Classroom assignment and put the rules there, and the students automatically know what to do. No more question sets. You could just give them those 2 visual icons, those cues, and they take the lead. The learning is theirs. It's about them. It also adds great visuals. So these are the icons. I'm not going to take a ton of time to go through every single one. I'm just going to give you an example for each one. So language of the discipline. We might say, what are some key terms or phrases used in the Constitution of the U.S.? The words we use when describing math problems. Let's take a look at the word red coat. Is that something you could buy at a store? Details. I know this one seems really simple, but think about critical thinking. How could you use details to get there? Identify 3 lines of dialogue in the passage that helped you deeply understand the protagonist's position. What details do you need in order to determine the surface area of a prism? Which details in the story could be left out, which couldn't? See, what this is doing is it's taking just reading something or understanding it to a deeper level more quickly by narrowing the scope of what you're asking the student to do. Patterns. This one is kind of neat. We have lots of patterns in nature and science. This is beyond just cycles and patterns. It's really more about the cause. So, for instance, what patterns do we see in our multiplication tables? What do those patterns tell us? It helps the students zoom out and start to see the bigger picture. So it defines the cause and effect of the pattern, and it helps students see the relationships among patterns and begin to take what they've learned in one area and apply it to the next lesson. Rules, we already talked a little bit about. What rules existed between the greasers and the Socs? What rules are used to describe proper fractions? Big idea, we discussed there. 3 big ideas related to the water cycle. What big ideas or themes did the story express? Ethical issues. This is one of my favorite ones to teach from because it's all about right or wrong. It's about morality. So once you start looking at history, especially, this is a great one for social studies and ELA, and I guess maybe even math. I've got an example here. Consider ethical issues surrounding Spanish colonization and the establishment of missions along the California coast. Or you could take it all the way down to 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 1st grade, and as you're teaching anything or any story, what ethical dilemma, what problems did our main character face when she made the decision she made? Okay, change over time. This one is one of the hardest ones to teach. It's really higher level. My daughter, Ella, has Mr. Curry for AP, and she shared with me some of the questions after she took the test for AP Hug, and one of the major themes I saw in those questions was change over time. Migration patterns. You got to think about how students can get into critical thinking and not just spit back information, but understand what events led to changes over time and how something has evolved. Last couple here. Trends. So trends are what comes into play. What are some trends related to COVID-19? How did we see things for a while there at the beginning? How do people feel about masks now? How did they feel about masks to begin with? What do you think will be the trend 6 months from now? Will we be more careful? Will we need to? That could be a political dumpster fire, but hey, it's relevant, right? Unanswered questions, that goes without saying. You guys know what that is. We've already talked about multiple perspectives. Across disciplines, this one is kind of cool too. Let's look at the California Gold Rush. Science, economics, history. Through what disciplines might we better understand roller coasters? So just taking any topic and getting kids to start thinking more broadly. Here are some links for you guys. If you're interested but not sure, you need more information, I have looked at probably 20 links. These are the best 4. They give you actual resources that you can print and use right now. Great ideas for many lessons on this one. This is a kind of an at-a-glance, what is this system, in case you just want to see it from a different point of view. On this 3rd link right here is this cheat sheet. I have this printed and laminated at my desk and up on my board so students can get it quickly. It's also something you can put on Google Classroom because it reminds them of what each icon means. And then once they know them, you can post them and they go. So I'm interested, I'm informed now, I need the stuff. Here is a link you guys can use to download the icons. I know this is a video, but in the link below, you'll be able to find this presentation and the icons, and then lessons. If you Google depth and complexity, if you don't do anything else, try this. Google depth and complexity, science, grade 5, say. You'll find what you need. There are a lot of teachers ahead of us on this one. So, all right, guys, that's all for me. Just remember, we're all in this together. Thanks for your time.